I'm Holly.
I'm Leslie.
And we would be dead. Leslie.
Hey, Holly.
Hey, Fiends. Welcome back to part 2 of the Scream Murders, a.k.a. the Gainesville Ripper. Yes, it nauseated me to use that name, but it is widely known. It's what everybody uses for him. And it's almost always how people refer to this case, so I can't avoid it altogether, but I will limit its use.
Cool.
I don't like it. Too glamorous. Get out of here. Plus, our Jack the Ripper case is the one where we got all is not well from.
That's right.
He doesn't deserve a link to that.
No, he doesn't.
I still want those t-shirts.
That's true.
Just the town crier and it says all is not well.
Yeah.
Would you guys wear that? I would wear it. Okay.
All right. I'll work on it.
Perfect. But also, you guys, I'm nauseated by that name. I'm nauseated by living with this case for 2 weeks. And it's left me a little worse for the wear in general, I think. You know, I'm definitely not looking my best right now, which is a problem. I've tried to bring a little color back into my cheeks, but nothing seemed to work. I guess I could just go back to sleeping and drinking water. Lame, right?
Stupid.
Or I could try this mythological activity called relaxing.
That doesn't sound right.
It's weird. I'm not going to do it. I'd rather try the easy way out, like all of us.
Yeah.
A super secret ingredient. And
Ozempic.
Ozempic.
Yeah.
No. This is a little bit different.
Okay.
Because I have heard that all I would need to restore my complexion are just a few precious drops of
validation. A hill worth dying on.
I'd really set it apart from that Ozempic jingle.
You did, yeah.
Good job. And Leslie, the best part is our fiends can give us that soulful ingredient totally for free.
What? How? Oh, how? You.
But how? You must be asking yourself.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that again or do you want to leave it?
No.
This is fun.
Just something out of my throat.
Okay. Well, I will tell you. Simply head on over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating and or a friendly review. It really is the only way to move this podcast forward. Ratings and reviews equal attention, attention equals support, and support equals more and better content for all of you. But if you just can't wait for more We Would Be Dead in your life, don't worry, you don't have to.
Woohoo!
You can support us over on Patreon. I feel like Cookie Monster's here this week.
Maybe.
I'm not mad at it. I like it.
We should bring cookies.
Seriously. There, for just a few dollars a month, you will gain access to our entire catalog of 30-minute horror movies, some special mini-sodes, our weekly after show, Host Mortem, which is available in both video and audio formats. Maybe you want to see our faces. Maybe you don't. Both are okay. You'll also get a special gift in the mail from us, the opportunity to participate in giveaways, some merch deals, and Christmas is coming. An on-air toast dedicated just to you and more. We do have more exclusive content in the works for you, our beloved patrons, but if you have anything you'd like to see, never hesitate to let us know. In all honesty, we are here thanks to our patrons, so come on over and be part of the We Would Be Dead family.
Nice.
It's cozy. And if all of that is a little too much for you, you can simply follow us on social media. We are at Would Be Dead Pod anywhere and everywhere you get your content. You can like our posts, share our posts, like and share our posts.
Yes.
That's the nicest one. You can leave us a comment, post about your favorite episode, let us know when you're listening, tell a friend, tell a neighbor, and we're going to use the same one, that one person who remembers absolutely everything. Now, see, last week it was Megan, but I think that she has a teammate. I think that they work together. What's her teammate's name? Like their text thread is immaculate and it has every detail of every gossipy thing ever in it.
I know, like a Sharon.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah, Megan and Sharon.
I can feel the energy coming off that
Sherry.
already.
It's like Sherry.
Yeah. Then your friends and Megan and Sharon, who sometimes goes by Sherry, can become fiends and we can all hang out together. And they will have all of the gossip.
All of the gossip.
And every receipt.
Sure.
So in them we trust. Well, I think that's all I have in the way of news before we begin. Leslie, do you have anything to add?
Not one bit.
All right.
News.
Okay. All right then. On with the show. Friendly reminder, you guys, that this is a part 2. If you haven't listened to part 1, this is not going to make a whole lot of sense. So if you haven't listened to part 1, go on back and do that right now. And don't worry, we'll still be right here when you're done. All right. When we left off last week, the Alachua County Police Department had arrested a man named Ed Humphrey on assault charges, with the suspicion that he had also committed the 5 murders they were trying to solve in Gainesville. The media had swarmed the city and were looking for any and all information on the so-called Gainesville Ripper. And for that specific reason, Ed Humphrey was the perfect suspect. Now, we talked about this last week. Ed was tall and stocky with a face full of scars. And Leslie, you mentioned, I don't remember if we talked about this on the air or not, but like without the scars, he was a classically good-looking guy.
Yeah, we talked about that off air.
Okay. But it's true. He looks like he has like this blonde hair, blue eyes, just looks like a he looks like a football player or something, in my opinion.
He's cute.
He is cute. But his face is, and it's not one scar.
Yeah,
when you see the picture, his face is covered in scars because he had gotten, it turns out, in a car accident the year prior. So that's what happened. I'm imagining he must have like gone through the windshield or something to cut up his face like that. But it's a lot. Like pirate a lot. He had also been diagnosed with multiple mental health issues and had gone on and off his medication sporadically. While incarcerated, they put him back on his meds, but they put him on a really high dose of them, which made him very lethargic, which like, they'll do that. And being like tired like that also meant that his eyes were half closed most of the time and his speech was slow and slurred.
Oh,
and
it's a lot going against him.
He really did. And it's creepy. That is creepy.
Yeah.
Inarguably creepy.
Right. I mean, he looks creepy in those shots.
Yeah, but now imagine him being like, I don't know, like lumbering around. It created a very effective visual. And they knew what they were doing. The media knew what they were doing. As soon as they saw him, they were like, yes!
Yeah.
Ratings everywhere. And to add insult to injury, his actual arrest, what they were holding him on, was for assaulting his own grandmother multiple times.
Ooh.
You're beating up an old lady.
That's rough.
Yeah, it's really rough. But I do have to call attention to the fact that grandma defended him and dropped all the charges. Not meaning that it's excusable to beat up your own grandma, but I think she was like, this is my grandson and he is sick in the head.
Right.
He needs help sometimes, but he's not murdering people.
Yeah, she was mostly like, I'm calling for help, not for him to like have the death penalty.
Yeah, exactly. She in no way could she ever have imagined, oh, they're probably going to collar him for 5 murders.
Right.
That wasn't a thing. So add that to the fact that this case takes place in the early 90s. It starts in 1990, it goes till like 1994. And this is the golden era of true crime, televised news, and court TV.
Right.
I mean, we like true crime now. It's more of it's taken into the world of podcasts. There's still documentaries and stuff. But back then it was just network television and it was on a lot. So you were kind of force-fed it. You didn't even choose to see it. It was just there. And this guy, Ed's interviews are all over people's TV. Everyone's seeing him act like this, not just the people in court. And that affected him pretty poorly as well. Because the way Ed looked and presented himself is if you said, hey, think of a serial killer, that would be what you said.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, however, serial killers are disappointingly generic looking white guys. Yes, there are a couple of women, but let's be honest here. It's mainly guys. It looks as though the Alachua County Police Department had a slam dunk on their hands. I mean, the media was satisfied. People were satisfied. The only problem was Ed's DNA and blood type did not match the DNA found on the Gainesville murder victims.
Yeah, that feels pretty big.
It's huge. It basically guarantees that he didn't do this. As much as they would have liked it to be Ed, there was no way he could have committed those crimes. I mean, they had semen and it did not match him. This, however, did not stop the Alachua Police Department from letting the public believe that he possibly could have done this.
I know, this part's really sad.
It's super sad. Like, they don't let that information out. They were able to convict him of a big enough assault charge to keep him in jail. So he got like a 5-year sentence for something that doesn't usually carry a 5-year sentence because they were like, well, we got to keep him in place. But he had also, while he was in jail, been charged with these murders. They had enough that they felt that they could charge him. And when the press asked investigators if they thought Ed was the Gainesville Ripper, they're like, so, like, he's accused of these, like, do you really think he's the guy who did it? They would always be like, oh, yeah, we definitely think he's the most promising suspect. So they didn't do anything to say, actually, no, we know it's not him.
Right.
It's a tap dance that I don't like. And I'm not sure what the plan they had for that was. Just lock him up anyway? I don't know, because they couldn't really keep him forever. Maybe they were just trying to buy time. I don't know. While this might have been good for them, it was ruining Ed's life.
I imagine.
Yeah. And meanwhile, the killer struck again.
Ugh.
Well, not really. But another murder with all the hallmarks of the Gainesville Ripper did come to light. And you guys, I had my dates confused when I set up the cliffhanger last week. I'm very sorry. Wires got briefly crossed, but we're back on track now. These murders did not happen while Ed was in jail, but they were exposed while he was in jail.
Okay.
Because during this time, a call came into the Alachua County Police Department from some detectives over in Shreveport, Louisiana. They had heard all about the Gainesville murders in the news, which it was hard not to, and it gave them a serious case of déjà vu. Something eerily similar had happened in Shreveport on Sunday, November 4th, 1989. 55-year-old Tom Grissom had lived in a lovely 3-bedroom house on Beth Lane in the Southern Hills section of Shreveport. So this is one of those cities with neighborhoods. That's why you'll see that they live in Southern Hills, but it was also in Shreveport. Southern Hills was a family-driven neighborhood featuring tree-lined streets and nice, affordable housing. You can still get like a big, beautiful house in this section of town for like $135,000.
Yeah.
You can't buy a shed for that much money where we live.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
That's bananas. Coincidentally, Shreveport is also a college town. It is the location of Centenary College of Louisiana, Louisiana State University Shreveport, Louisiana Tech University Shreveport, Southern University at Shreveport, and Louisiana Baptist University. That's a lot of colleges.
Sure.
I mean, they're not as big as Florida State, but that's it's a pretty good representation.
Yeah.
Tom Grissom lived with his 24-year-old daughter, Julie, who was attending LSU Shreveport, so she's in town for the college. And that weekend, Tom and Julie were hosting their 8-year-old grandson/nephew. So this would be Tom's son and Julie's brother, Scott's son. And his name is Sean. The visit was part of Sean's birthday celebration. So I guess Grandpa was like, we're going to take him for the night and have a fun time and celebrate his birthday. It'll be great. Which is cute. But before we get into what happened, Leslie, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about Tom, Julie, and Sean.
Sure.
Excellent.
So William Tom Grissom was the father of Julie and was the grandfather of Sean. He's a veteran of the U.S. Army. He worked as a section chief at AT&T and was a member of the Brookwood Baptist Church. Tom was known for his polite and friendly demeanor and had been battling throat cancer for years.
Oh.
But he was showing improvement in his condition. He was nearing retirement and had previously been married to Joyce Grissom, to whom they had 2 children, Julie and Scott.
Got it.
And then Julie Grissom was born on April 24th, 1965 in Greenfield, Indiana, before moving to Shreveport, Louisiana. So that's where Joyce and Tom must have lived prior to them moving. I don't know where Joyce is now. I don't know much about
Maybe she
Joyce,
stayed in Indiana.
the ex-wife.
Yeah, they really don't talk about her.
Yeah.
Which is fine. She doesn't need to be in this.
Right. So at 24 years old, Julie was a graduate of Louisiana State University of Shreveport and worked as an account representative for Liz Claiborne at Dillard's. Julie was also an active member of the church as well that her father went to. on the day of her death, she had plans to attend a friend's wedding and had picked out a red dress for an occasion. So I don't know that she was going to the wedding that night because I think that there was like other dinner plans happening, but I think she had like plans at least for the weekend for like a wedding celebration for a friend.
Or maybe like she was going to hang out with them and then the boys were going to have dinner and she was going to go to this wedding.
Yeah,
it's
either
possible.
way, I did read that she had like this whole dress picked out and that was, was waiting to be in it. I know. And then Sean Grissom is 8 years old. He is Julie's nephew and Tom's grandson again. He was a third grader at Turner Elementary School and was described as a bright and cheerful child loved by his family. Obviously, being 8, there's not that much details about him that the family put out there. But he was celebrating a birthday, which is so sad.
It's just the worst thing. Yep, it's the worst thing. So the plan was for Sean to spend the night, and it may have been the weekend, as you mentioned. That's really neither here nor there, but he was supposed to spend, this was like his birthday celebration with Grandpa, basically. I mean, my kids have special birthdays with their grandparents, so it makes perfect sense to me. And Julie lived there. So I think she might have just been like an accessory to these plans. Because like you said, if she was planning to go to a wedding too, she was like, I live here and I'm here for it, but this is all about them. Tom had planned on cooking steaks for dinner. And he said he would drop Sean off the next morning before school on his way to work. Easy peasy, right? The next morning, drop-off time came and went, and no Sean. Sean's mother called Tom's house multiple times looking for them, but nobody picked up the phone. This is the day of landlines, so she's calling one phone in a house that rings. Time ticked by, and the school day began. So sitting there watching the clock and knowing that school is in session and you've not seen your kid, I can't.
Yeah.
But your rational brain is going to kick in. Sean's mother started to get nervous because she knew Tom wouldn't want Sean to miss school. She thought maybe there had been a miscommunication somehow, though. Maybe her husband had spoken to her father-in-law. Maybe Tom thought he was supposed to drop Sean off at school. That makes sense. He's just going to take him to school. Okay. Just then, the phone rang, though, and it was Sean's school. They were calling to inform her that Sean hadn't come in that morning. She told them that she didn't know what happened. Sean was at his grandfather's house, and she hadn't been able to get a hold of them all morning. So the school is now on alert, too. Like, something's funny. So, like, if you do see him, if he shows up or anything like that, you got to call home.
Right.
Now, at this point, if it had been me, I would be thinking that best case scenario, Tom had let Sean stay up really late watching movies and eating birthday cake, and none of them had gotten up on time that morning, and they all slept in or something. It's a stretch. But it's not out of the realm of possibilities, right? Or maybe he was like, you can cut school and we'll go get breakfast. Not regular, but like, I would not be assuming, I guess something horrible happened,
Right.
Sean's mom got off the phone with the school and immediately called the damn cops. Smart move. The police called several of Tom's neighbors. This is a weird move, in my opinion. I would think the cops would go, we're going to go right over for a wellness check. But they were like, we'll just call his neighbors. Do you know them? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Anyway, they asked the neighbors if there was anything amiss over at Tom's house. They were like, does it look weird over there?
So strange.
I know. And the neighbors were like, it doesn't look weird, but it's like, after 8:30 and the cars are in the driveway, all the lights in the house are on, and the newspaper is still sitting in the driveway where the paperboy threw it. Like nobody's been up and about. Technically, I can't tell you something's wrong, but it looks weird.
Yeah.
Right? And you can add that to my list of things that are not inherently scary, but feel off and eerie.
I agree.
Police then asked, there's still giving the neighbor tasks. Police then asked the neighbor to go to Tom's house and knock. They're like, go knock on the door.
Oh my God.
Why? What if there is a dangerous person in that house holding them hostage?
I know, this is wild.
It's super wild. And the neighbor's like, okay, hold on.
Oh my God.
This whole situation is farcical. And they go over and they knock on the door. Nobody answers. So they go back and they're like, all right, we knocked. Nobody's coming to the door. And the police go, okay, can you see if any of the doors are unlocked?
Oh, good Lord. Are you putting me on the payroll this week?
I know, right? And the neighbor's like, all right, I'll call you back. So they hang up and they go over to Tom's house. This is such an odd thing to ask them to do. And to me, it also seems like a veiled request. Nowhere does it say that the police out and out told the neighbors to go inside that house. But what did they think they were going to do?
I know.
Technically, that's trespassing, too. And Louisiana has stand your ground laws. In the event that a neighbor snuck into Tom's house and Tom was awake and armed and thought they were an intruder, he would have been totally within his legal rights to shoot them dead.
Yeah.
What? And the cop's like, just go look over there. I can't.
These are neighbors. I mean, it is the 90s.
I know, but it's not the 40s.
I just walked into my friend's house all the time.
And that might have been normal for like neighbor behavior, but for a police to suggest it, like, I don't know. It's just it's like a little off. I don't know how that neighborhood was. Maybe they all knew each other. Maybe these neighbors and the police were buddies.
They did,
Must have been that way.
Yeah.
But generally, police would rather you wait for them to show up in a potentially dangerous situation rather than just barging in to deal with it yourself. Something about Louisiana throws all of that out the window because the same thing happened at Dee Dee Blanchard's house, if you remember. One of the neighbors was like, I'm going in the window.
Oh,
and that's how they found out.
Yeah.
So, okay. And the neighbors did find an unlocked door. And of course they opened it. Like, what were they going to do?
I mean, this is definitely like a Meg and Sherry situation.
I know, they're
They'd
watching.
Like, all ready to go in.
Oh, absolutely. The door that they found unlocked was to a utility room in the back of the house. So like a laundry room, mud room type situation. And they tried to open it, but the door hit into something. And it was like difficult to push past it. I don't know. Something was blocking the entrance. The neighbor couldn't push the door open all the way, but they were able to shove whatever it was far enough to open the door a crack. They peered in, trying to see what was in front of the front door. They hadn't forced it too hard because it could have been breakable. But I think we all know what it was. The neighbor didn't see a bucket of painting supplies or a piece of antique furniture. The thing that was leaning against the door was a body. Mm-hmm. And there's like blood pool on the floor and stuff. It's not like maybe they're asleep. It's like very clearly a body. He just
a little cat nap after lunch.
Yeah. No. The neighbor said that he didn't know who it was, but he knew that they were dead. So he closed the door and ran as fast as he could.
Smart.
Yeah. You should have never been in that position, first of all. Mm-hmm. But second of all, that's the right reaction to have. He called the police back. He's like, okay, I'm going to call you back. Yeah. He's like, calls them back. He's like, hey, there is an open door and there's a body in there. And they're like, okay, we're already on our way.
Yeah.
Why'd you have him do that then?
Right.
I don't know. Once the authorities arrived, they discovered that it was Tom's body slumped against the utility room door. He had been going in and out of the backyard to cook steaks on the grill for birthday dinner. He had been stabbed several times in the back and chest. Next, they found little Sean lying dead on the living room floor. Yeah, he had sustained one stab wound in the back that went all the way through to his chest. Why'd you have to kill the kid? You didn't have to kill the kid. No. Really, you didn't. Now, this is a horrific scene in and of itself, but Julie is what drew the detective's attention. She had been stabbed multiple times in the back, but was found lying face up on her bed. She was half sitting on the edge of her bed with her feet hanging off the edge and touching the floor. Her body was posed provocatively. There was evidence that Julie had been raped, so they were able to collect DNA evidence from her body. Her body had been cleaned with vinegar, but this was just a substitute for soap, really. I mean, it's the same sort of process. And there was duct tape residue on her wrists and mouth. The house bore no signs of forced entry and nothing was stolen. This leads me to believe that in this one case, he had gone in through an open door as opposed to, because it was 6 to 8 o'clock at night. Sure, this wasn't really late. And it just became obvious to the police that because nothing is stolen, this person just wanted to kill people. Mm-hmm. Immediately, Shreveport detectives assumed that the person they were looking for was a local. They felt sure it was someone that they probably had spoken to before. This kind of thing isn't anyone's first crime, and they're right about that. Shreveport detectives also didn't suspect that the murderer would attack anybody else because the whole thing seemed really personal. It seemed that this person really had something against these people, and that was it. Mm-hmm. And that's not a bad theory. Really, it isn't. Under normal circumstances, you would think, oh yeah, this is personal. But just in case, they were like, I just love killing people. The area police set up 24-hour surveillance of the neighborhood. So Shreveport did the damn thing. This is good police work. Though they didn't turn up anything right away, the Shreveport police's initial suspicions were right. The killer had lived just 1.5 miles down the road from the Grissom's house. He was local, and they had spoken to him before. But it would take just one more observant news watcher to crack this case wide open. It was Megan and Sherry. They were there. Well, essentially it was. After the Shreveport PD told Gainesville investigator Don Maines about the possible connection, Don was like, I got to get to Shreveport. And he drove all the way there right away. And Shreveport's 12 hours from Gainesville. It's like a long drive to take a look at all their evidence and talk about the possibility of combining their efforts. This is not a case of, I want my case, it's my case. These cops were like, oh no, we're a team now. We have to figure this out, which also points to the cops for that. It does not always happen. That is a good team effort.
They were like, the neighbors have done enough.
I think we've asked enough of that guy who is now like in the corner babbling to himself. So what Don Maines finds out is that the Grissom's family killer had the same blood type and DNA profile as the murderer in Gainesville. So this is the same person, most likely. And the similarities were undeniable. And if they were the same guy, there was double no way that it was Ed Humphrey. Ed was in high school in Florida in November of 1989. Shreveport was a 12-hour drive from Gainesville, and Ed didn't know anything about Shreveport. Besides that point, he had been in school that Monday. Medical examiners estimated that the Grissom family were killed between 6 and 8 p.m. on Sunday night. It would have been close to physically impossible for Ed to have driven to Shreveport, committed those crimes in a random place he had never been, and made it back home in time for school on Monday.
Sure, yeah.
And let's not forget, his blood type and DNA are still not a match.
Yeah, he was not there.
So did they drop Ed's murder charges and tell the press he wasn't their guy?
I'm going to say no.
No, they didn't. Not yet. They were like, keep him in there. They still couldn't be sure. And also they didn't have anybody else. But that didn't last long. Enter Cindy Jurasic. It might be Jurasic. Juracich. So Cindy, if you're listening, 1, you're an amazing rock star. 10 points to you. And 2, I'm very sorry I pronounced your name weird. So according to ABC News, quote, Cindy was on a trip through the Florida Panhandle in August of 1990 when she heard a news report about a grisly string of murders. They immediately made her think about a man from her Louisiana hometown church who used to spend time with her and her family. How awful would that be? Ugh. If you hear like all these terrible murders happen and you're like, I might know that.
Well, that reminds me of Ted Bundy and his wife who was just like, I think I know the guy.
Yeah, I heard a lot of news that sounds just like the guy that lives with me, but it's going to take me a hot minute.
Yeah.
And Donny Rolling would have loved that comparison because he idolized Ted Bundy. Blech. And I just gave it away. That man was a local named Donny Rolling, which you're going to know from the title anyway. And Donny had once told Cindy that he was going to leave Shreveport where they lived. He said, quote, one day I'm going to leave this town and I'm going to go to where the girls are beautiful and I can just lay in the sun and watch beautiful women all day long. Which is like kind of gross, but also I wouldn't be like, oh, you probably murdered those people.
Right, exactly.
Don't worry, there's more.
Okay.
Quote, the murders were eerily similar to 3 others that had occurred in Shreveport in November of 1989. She said she thought of Rolling, who just a few months after the murders in their community said something deeply disturbing to her then husband, Steve Dobbin. And it wasn't like, I just like girls a lot.
Yeah.
Cindy said, quote, he'd come over every night for a while. And then one night, Steven came in and he goes, he's got to go. Jurassic said. Dobbin told her that Donny Rolling had told him he had a problem. And Cindy said, what kind of problem? And her husband said, he likes to stick knives into people.
Yeah, that's wrong.
He's got to go. Get him out of your house. Cindy said that she dismissed these comments when she heard about them because, quote, she didn't want to believe that Rolling could be responsible for the triple murders in Shreveport. But news of the Gainesville murders haunted Jurassic, and in November of 1990, she decided to contact police on a hunch that Rolling was connected to the murders in both cities. This woman's intuition is fucking gold.
Yeah.
Quote, it would not let me rest, she said. One day I picked up the phone and I called Crime Stoppers, and I said, I think there's one guy y'all need to investigate, Donny Rolling. Crime Stoppers reported back to Don Maine and the detectives from Shreveport, and they immediately began to look into this Donny Rolling person. And when they did, they found a lot.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, he was not new to crime.
Okay.
Donny had an extensive police record. Quote, Rolling had spent a couple years in the U.S. Air Force before beginning a career of crime. He was convicted of armed robbery in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi for several grocery store robberies and spent most of the 1980s in prison. There are a few articles that say he escaped from prison a few times. I can't find it anywhere else. I think they are confusing him with Ted Bundy, which he would love, and I hate. So, no. 3 months before the Gainesville murders, quote, in May of 1990, Rolling and his father had an argument in which Rolling's father chased him out of the house at gunpoint, said one of the detectives. Then, Rolling came back with his own gun and shot his father in the face, said the state attorney.
Oh, wow.
So he also had that on his record.
Okay.
Quote, it was a small caliber gun and the father survived, but not without permanent damage. His dad lost like an eye and part of his ear, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. But this is a disturbed man, right? You're not dealing with your average Joe Schmo at this point. Admittedly, he is also way more disturbed than Ed Humphreys. Now that makes like grandma assault look like child's play.
Mm-hmm.
The lead looked good. This looked good, but not good enough for an arrest just yet. But seeing that Donny Rolling had been convicted of multiple robberies reminded the Florida detectives of something else. The bank robbery that had happened the night of Krista Hoyt's murder. They had never put the two crimes together before, but if this guy liked to steal and he was in the area, it certainly was possible. All the evidence from the campsite of that strange man who they followed into the woods.
Yeah.
We'll post pictures of his campsite. It is awful. The guy who had robbed a bank was still sitting in an evidence locker, untouched. So they're like, we got to get there. And I imagine they ran all the way down to evidence at this point.
Right.
Among the evidence was a gun, a screwdriver, that's a big hint because that's what was used to break into all those houses, the bag of red-stained money, and that weird little cassette player. I know. Make both of us really mad. Finally, someone was like, we should listen to that tape. I know, man. I know. And it was not like an awesome mix of workout jams either. No.
I can't imagine I feel like they just called in the neighbor to be like, can you listen to this cassette?
Hey, can you play this tape?
Yeah.
You've already seen a lot. Let's bring you back in. Imagine it was like the person who was just sitting around. Yeah.
Yeah.
The tape was odd and spooky. It was a mix of audio diary entries, instructions on how to hunt, kill, and clean deer. He definitely wasn't talking about deer.
Yeah.
Quote, the man also talked to his family. So he was it was like letters to his family that he was dictating.
This is gross.
And he talked about life and how he felt that what he was doing was wrong and he was going down the wrong path. Dear Dad, I've been a bad boy. Like, what? Come on.
Oh, my God.
And then there were the original songs.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're folksy country songs with lyrics like, Mystery Rider, what's your name? You're a killer, a drifter, gone insane.
Wait, I think has somebody uploaded these?
I played this for you last week.
Okay. Yeah.
You can listen to a lot of these, you guys. You can listen to him singing this little lyric. You can listen to him doing a little talking.
Yeah.
I don't love it, but it is out there. It is not looking good for whoever's making this tape. They're like, oh no, you've done a lot. Oh man. So police are sitting there totally stunned, listening to this tape, thinking of ways that they could connect all of this to Donny Rolling, right? They're like, oh, maybe he says where he's from or something. But then out of nowhere, he just says his full government name.
There you go.
She's like, and he's like, and I, Daniel Harold Rolling. And they're like, oh, cool. We don't have to do anything else. So it's arrest time. Hook 'em, book 'em, cook 'em. The cops were geared up to locate Donny and bring him in. And just as they were putting on their cop shoes and shining up their badges or whatever the police do to get ready for an arrest, they got word that they could relax because Donny was already in jail.
Oh.
Convenient. And I imagine the cops were like, okay, but he hasn't been there for 10 years or something, right?
Right. I know. They were like, for how long?
Because we really need this one to work. We've already messed up once. But luckily, he had been detained 40 miles south of Gainesville in Marion County, where he was being held for another robbery he'd committed at a supermarket just 10 days after Tracy Paulus and Manny Tabota's bodies were found. So all the timelines are timelining up.
Okay.
They're like, whew, great. So now it's time for our heroes to book it on down to Marion County, I suppose. And full disclosure, they were so pissed they didn't listen to that tape sooner.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They freely admit this was a mistake.
Yeah.
They said, quote, if we had played that tape before, we would have had this guy 3 months ago, said Detective Maines. But for some reason, somehow that tape escaped us, and I will freely admit it.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, dude, I get it. Shit happens. It does suck, though. If you go back and you're like, I had the evidence. I had it.
Yeah.
So detectives call the folks in Marion County to let them know they were coming. I imagine the Marion County Police Department is like, oh, we have this guy? High five us. And they also asked really quickly, do you guys happen to have Danny's blood type on file anywhere? And it was type B, just like the killer.
Oh.
And to the surprise of absolutely no one, Danny looks like a lukewarm glass of whole milk. They always do. Danny was a 37-year-old, lightly balding white man with dark hair and dark eyes. Some reports say he's 6 foot, some reports say he's 6'2". He does not read especially big or tough. There are a lot of pictures of him out there. He does not look like someone I would see and go, that's a scary dude. Right. He looks like someone I would see and go, he probably sells insurance. Like, it's just nothing. His eyes and mouth also point comically downward like droopy dog. He has this permanent, like, upside down smile in every picture. Okay. And I will forever be angry that he probably saw Scream and thought of himself like, oh, so they think I look like Skeet Ulrich? Awesome.
Oh my God.
No, we don't think that, friend. So now did they stop on the way and let Ed Humphrey out? No. Of course not. They didn't. He had to wait just a little bit longer because of nothing. On November 15th, 1991, Donny Rolling was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder in connection to the college student's death in Gainesville, and he was facing, for these actions, the death penalty. And then they let Ed Humphrey out. Just kidding, they didn't let him out. They just took the murder charges away. But he still had to serve, like, his full 4-year sentence for the assault. Yeah. Charges that they made way bigger than usual because they wanted to hold him for these murders. So really, he should have had his sentence amended, but they didn't do that.
And his, like, grandma was, like, going in to see him.
Oh, she was.
I brought you a little basket of muffins.
Oh, she was devastated. They were all devastated. Yeah. And he had to work incredibly hard even when he got out. After he got out, he had to have the police issue statements that are like, my bad, man.
Yeah.
He didn't do that. And we really, we just needed somebody. The situation was desperate.
We used his mental health against him.
Yeah.
For our benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure they said it. I have some quotes from them. I don't know if
they could say what they want to, but that's what they
can say what they want to, but that is absolutely what they did. And he had to fight to get like a retraction from the police because in the court of public opinion, he was a serial killer.
Right.
People who saw him on the street would be like, you murdered people, even though he definitely didn't.
Yeah.
But he did go on to graduate from college like magna cum laude and make a life for himself. Oh, Ed's doing fine. He's married. He has a kid, living his best life. Yep. So that sucks, but he's okay. And it's important to remember that. So before we get into all of Danny's super weird confessions and parts of his dramatic trial, we should take a little look at who Donny Rolling was and what growing up for him was like, because it was not normal. Surprise, surprise. Now I'm going to try and keep this kind of brief and clinical because Danny himself has retold and published a great many of these details. And while I do think that he went through a lot of horrible things, and there are people that can back up some of it, I also think he zhuzhed it up for the folks at home. So, Danny's just not a reliable narrator, so we'll do what we can. Donny Harold Rolling was born on May 26, 1954 to Claudia and James Rolling in Shreveport, Louisiana. So he was a local to Shreveport. Danny's mother, Claudia, was excited to have a child, but his father, James, was not. And he didn't keep that a secret. From the time this kid was born, he was like, nobody wants you, especially me. I don't want a kid.
Oh.
Yeah. James started beating Danny regularly when he was just a year old. It started because James was mad that Danny wasn't crawling properly. You're not good at crawling, so I'm going to beat the shit out of you. Yeah, honestly, by a year old, he probably should have been standing and cruising. Leslie, both of our girls were fully walking by their first birthday. My son was definitely cruising around and could do it. So if this kid was having trouble crawling at that age, he might have needed help.
Yeah.
Not a head injury. But none of that matters because what we need to focus on is the fact that his father was using corporal punishment on a baby. That's insane.
Yeah.
Oh, and before I forget, James was a cop and he never stopped acting like a cop. He was a cop at work. He was a cop at home. He was a cop at the bar. He was always a cop.
Oof.
Yeah.
All right.
And I am not saying that of all police officers. Many people can turn it off. He couldn't. So Shortly after this 1-year-old incident, Danny's brother Kevin was born, which made James even angrier. He didn't want one baby, so what the fuck was he supposed to do with two? But Kevin was the new guy, and James already had established the beating thing with Danny, so he stuck to Danny and mostly left Kevin alone. It's going to make you real resentful of your brother, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And James did all kinds of crazy things to Danny. And you guys can read on your own if you want. There are pages and pages and pages of accounts of this. But I'm going to give you kind of a greatest hits rundown or worst hits. He would beat him with a belt, punch him with a closed fist. Once he threw him to the ground and handcuffed him just for being embarrassing. And then he took it a little further and locked him up in a holding cell overnight because he was a cop and he could do that. So he was like, you embarrassed me, so you have to go to jail. And this is like a 10-year-old. This isn't like a full-on young adult. He also told Danny all the time that he was unwanted. And that specific phrase does something to your brain. Like if your parents say, I don't want you all the time, it rewires a kid's brain. It's not an excuse, but it does unlock some extremely specific trauma. And here's the one you guys are going to hate the most. Oh, if you can't listen to dog stuff, skip ahead. When Danny was a kid, he adopted a puppy. Sometimes when James was mad at Danny, instead of hitting Danny, he would make him watch while he mercilessly beat the puppy. He did it enough that at one point, it killed the puppy and it died in Danny's arms.
That's awful.
Yeah. And again, this is a very specific kind.
Awful.
It is. This is very manipulative and a specific kind of trauma. And I hate to say it, but it's not unique to this situation. You would be surprised at how many my dad beat my pet to death stories that are out there in the world. I don't like to say it's a lot, but it's a lot. It's like something universally horrible you can do to your child. Cool. And it didn't stop there, because if you think beating the puppy in front of him was bad, how do you think it felt for him to watch James beat Claudia, his mom? Not great. In one incident, James stood over Claudia and made her slit her wrists with a knife. Thankfully, this didn't kill her, but Danny absolutely saw it. Claudia tried to leave many times. She even left with the boys more than once, but she always came back. And she never protested when James would beat Danny. She just looked on and took it, or she walked away. And this made Danny hate his mother. Because in your mind, your mother is supposed to protect you, and she never did that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hazard a guess as to what Claudia looked like at this time?
Did she have brown hair? Was she fair-skinned?
Mm-hmm.
Was she a petite woman?
Mm-hmm. Yep, she sure was. Small, thin, fair, brown hair, brown eyes.
Oof.
And if that isn't the target he's looking for the rest of his life, I don't know what is. Danny's grandparents weren't any better either. As a child, Danny once watched his grandfather walk up behind his grandmother while she was sitting at the dinner table and cut her throat open with a kitchen knife.
Do you think did that happen?
Oh, yeah. There's other people that witnessed this.
Okay.
I thought the same thing. I'm like, there's no way that happened. But there was a table full of people and they confirmed that it happened. It didn't kill her. He just like cut her. He didn't like slit her whole throat.
The fuck?
I know, because I researched this woman's death and she didn't die that day. But right there at the dinner table, they had a little argument. People were fighting.
James's parents?
This is James' father. Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
Yep. She survived, thankfully, but that is so fucked up. There are no words. And she stayed with that man. They didn't get divorced after that. The women in Danny's life stayed with their abusers, and that made Danny hate them. Which, please don't even make me talk about how that logic is still so pervasive in America to this day. It's not that boys shouldn't beat and rape women. It's that women should dress more modestly, listen to what they're told, and carry weapons when they leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
Make it make sense. Just make it make sense. Moving on. As you may well be able to guess, this didn't translate into an enormously successful academic career for Danny.
Oh, no.
He wasn't off in his free time doing amazing at school and reading lots of books.
Yeah.
Danny's school counselors described him as, quote, suffering from an inferiority complex with aggressive tendencies and poor impulse control. And that tracks.
Yeah.
Of course. In the 3rd grade, Danny missed so many days of school due to unmanaged childhood illnesses that he failed the 3rd grade and had to be held back. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, it's probably that they're saying that because he was beat up and he had to stay home. No, he was sick a lot and they didn't do anything about it Because if you don't care about your kid hard enough to beat their puppy and their mother in front of their very eyes, you're probably not taking them to the doctors.
Yeah.
So we have head injuries, extreme trauma, most likely undiagnosed ADHD, among other things, and high sustained fevers. Now, I'm willing to bet that his brain was not operating at full speed. All of these things will rewire the synapses in your brain. They make your brain physically different than it was when you were born. This isn't even just a like, oh, he thinks differently. It is the hard wiring in your brain. And this is where his defense should have hung their hats, but it wasn't. Now, before we get to the trial, let's finish up with Danny's early life. By 11 years old, he was drinking regularly. So he was a drunk 11-year-old. That's wild. I don't know, if I were him, I might have needed a drink too.
Yeah, I was going to say that feels accurate.
But it's also not great for a developing brain.
No.
But it did numb the pain, especially the pain that was added when his one outlet was taken away from him. You see, little Danny was an artist. He wanted to be a star. And what his escape from all the things happening at home was music. He liked to go sing hymns at church. He learned how to play the guitar. And he liked to sing country music songs too. He was like, I'm going to be a singer and I'm going to get out of here. But his father hated that and wouldn't let it happen.
Of course.
Yeah. By 14 years old, Danny had started watching girls in town through their windows. So he's creeping around at night and staring in windows to try and watch girls get changed. But he wasn't very stealthy. He wasn't very good at it. And he got caught a lot, which of course led to more beatings as per usual. Quote, as a teenager and young adult, Rolling was arrested several times for robberies in Georgia and Alabama and was caught spying on a woman getting dressed. As an adult, he had trouble trying to assimilate into society and holding down a steady job. At one point, Danny worked as a waiter at Pancho's restaurant in Louisiana, but that didn't go very well for him either. He just didn't like listening to a boss. So he was like, Pancho, I don't care what you have to say. And since none of those things worked out, he decided that he would join the military. According to one biography, quote, the Navy wouldn't take him, so he joined the Air Force. That does not sound good for the Air Force.
Yeah.
But the military provided him no comfort. He eventually quit the Air Force after too much drug use. This is a quote, remember that, which included taking acid more than 100 times, which is also really bad for your brain. Sustained use of hallucinogens are also going to fuck up the wiring in your head. And you can't just quit the Air Force. I'm sorry to tell you, source, but they have to let you go. You can't be like, oh, I'm sorry, Air Force, I quit.
You can't just leave?
I don't think you can. That's like going AWOL. You have to be discharged. You have to serve your time or you're honorably or dishonorably discharged. But the military does that. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think you can just go, oh, I'm done. But, if I'm wrong, you can look that up and let me know. But Danny was actually discharged, and I can't imagine that it was super honorable because he was doing drugs all the time. And really, all he had to do was be caught doing those drugs, and the military would discharge him. So, following his discharge from the military, Danny managed to get married. He married a woman that he met in his church in Shreveport, in youth group activities. Her name was O'Mather. That is her real name. It's not O'Mather. It's not something else. She has since remarried. She goes by O'Mather Loomis. And that is her real name. And the two of them made a home and had a baby girl. We are not going to talk about her because she is not involved in anything and she doesn't deserve this association. But this family that he had created didn't work out either, obviously, and the pair ended up getting divorced. Quote, the cycle of abuse continued. At age 23, after being with his wife for 4 years, she separated from him after he threatened to kill her. That'll do it. This was in 1977. Danny turned his devastation into anger and raped a woman who closely resembled his ex-wife. So he does have a couple living victims. Later that year, he killed a woman in a car accident, which troubled him further. He likes to hang his hat on that, like, I killed someone, I didn't know. That's way different than what you did to those other people. After this, the Grissom murders occurred in our timeline. And it turned out that he had also been watching Julie Grissom for weeks through her window. So this was something where he saw her, he watched her, he liked her, and then he did this horrible thing. Yeah. In May of 1990, he shot his 58-year-old father twice and nearly killed him. We mentioned that before. That's where this is in the timeline. And though his dad survived, James Rolling lost an eye and an ear. And after that, Danny was like, I have to leave.
Yeah.
So he changed his identity with papers he stole after breaking into someone's house. That's another thing. He can get into people's houses. He fled Shreveport and took a bus to Florida to start his new life as Michael Kennedy Jr., which is, he probably wanted people to think he was an actual Kennedy, is what I'm imagining. And he did that in late July of 1990. So this is right before the Gainesville stuff happened.
Okay.
Then something very influential happened for all serial killers everywhere. The Exorcist 3 was released.
Oh my gosh.
And Danny definitely went to see it. If you will remember all the way back to when we covered Jeffrey Dahmer, you will remember that he too was very influenced by this film. Leslie, can you tell us a little bit about this historically important moment in cinematic history?
You got it.
Thank you.
All right. So The Exorcist 3 was released in the theaters August 17th, 1990. It's pretty different from the original Exorcist. It picks up years after the first movie and totally skips over The Exorcist 2. This time...
I love when they do that. We're like, we made that one, but like, no, thank you. Halloween 3 is like that.
Will also cause... So this movie wasn't like a huge hit. It was kind of a flop. And it's mostly because they called it The Exorcist 3. And everybody hated The Exorcist 2.
Uh-oh.
And so they were like, well, we don't want to go see more shit. So they just didn't really show up for it. But had they called it something else that basically could have said it is really a prequel to Exorcist, then, or a sequel, I guess, to the original, then I think more people would have showed up to it.
Interesting.
But it really didn't do that well right away. This time, we're following Lieutenant Kinderman, the detective from the original story, who's now a bit older, a bit more jaded, and honestly pretty haunted by his friend Father Carras's death.
Yeah, you shouldn't be a detective anymore. You should just go home and lay down.
Yeah, you're done.
You're so done.
Kinderman stumbles onto a case that's totally bizarre, a series of brutal murders in Georgetown that seem to copycat the style of the Gemini Killer, a serial murderer who's supposedly been dead for years. But as he digs deeper, Kinderman finds himself led to a psychiatric hospital where a mysterious patient claiming to be the Gemini Killer is somehow using Father Carras's body to carry out these new crimes.
Ew!
And yeah, it's as eerie as it sounds because this patient keeps flipping between two personas, Carras's and the Gemini Killer.
How Gemini?
I know. So you have Kinderman dealing with this mind-bending horror of seeing his friend's body being used for something sinister. The movie dives into some heavy stuff like faith, guilt, and the nature of evil, and it's creepy in a very different way from the first Exorcist. Instead of the head spinning and pea soup puking, it's all about atmosphere, disturbing dialogue, and tension that builds up. It's definitely a film that sticks with you, especially if you're a fan of stories that dive into the concept of good versus evil in a haunting, cerebral way.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I don't have like his ticket stub or anything, but Danny definitely saw that movie before he did stuff, and we'll get back to why later. But after taking it in, he decided to set up camp in the Florida woods. And I mean like a triangular, like a kid would draw it on a piece of paper, tent in the middle of the woods.
Okay.
Yeah, and he did that so he could sneak around at night and look into girls' windows. Like you do.
Great.
And, rob a bank. Then keep a detailed diary on his little tape recorder that he was having out there too. Great. So he would just look at these girls, but then the impulse to rape and murder them was too strong. And we all know what happened after that. That's when the Gainesville murders happened. So back to Danny in jail. He was charged with all 5 murders in Gainesville, not yet the Shreveport ones. And he was locked up, like not just for his robbery. They're like, no, you're in this jail now. But before he could stand trial for the murders, he was convicted on federal bank robbery charges. So they got him on that first so they could keep him like locked up without bail, I think. Quote, he was sent to Florida State Prison where he met another inmate named Bobby Lewis, who was on death row for killing a drug dealer in the 1970s. So then Danny does go on to confess, but he does it in the weirdest way possible. Like, I can't imagine. Anyway, according to ABC News, quote, John Donovan, a former reporter for ABC News who covered the Gainesville cases, said, Lewis claimed Donny Rolling told him many of the details of the murders and that Rolling wanted to confess. Lewis, this other guy, wrote out a 5-page letter outlining the details, many of which Hewitt said only the killer knew. Investigators wanted to confirm the details of Danny's confessions, so they arranged a meeting, but Donny Rolling insisted that this Lewis guy be there as well, and he would talk. Donny Rolling was like, I will not speak. He will speak for me. I will be there. But this guy's talking. I can't believe they agreed to that.
Right.
I really can't, because he's technically not saying anything.
Yeah.
So investigators sat down with Danny and this guy, and they had Lewis answer questions for Danny. After Lewis told the investigators what Danny had told him, they would ask Donny Rolling if what he said was correct. So this guy would be like, and then he slashed her throat. And they'd be like, Danny, is that right? And he'd be like, mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah. And his affirmations are all on tape. So like the cops were kind of savvy too. Oh, he's going to say he didn't actually say anything. But and this was important because they had this other guy participating in the confession. Quote, questioning elicited new details about the murders. They said they learned how Danny had returned to the crime scene after killing Christina Hoyt because he thought he might have lost his wallet, which we mentioned. He also mentioned a couple other like little details. He said that he fought with Manny Taboda and that Tracy Paulus heard the commotion and came into Manny's room. I hate this detail. This is what Danny said. He said, when Tracy saw me, she ran back into her bedroom and tried to lock her door. However, Danny was able to break through. And Tracy said, you're the one, aren't you? And Danny said, yeah, I'm the one.
Oh, man.
Okay, that's really dramatic. And I don't know if that happened at all. I think he may have added it to be like, and she knew exactly who I was because I'm very important and famous.
Yeah, okay.
Suck a dick. Oh, my God. According to this poor other guy on death row, quote, I've never been told nothing in reality, and I've never read nothing in a Stephen King novel that comes close to what the reality is of what this man did. This is a death row inmate that said that.
Right. Ugh.
Yeah. And the questioning went on. Danny started saying that he was dealt 2 different personalities in his life. He told investigators that he had darker personas. One was named Enad, which is Danny spelled backwards. Good. And he described Enad as a bad person, but not evil, just bad, not evil. And the second, more sinister personality was named Gemini. And Danny blamed him for his worst deeds. Gemini. Where have we heard that before? Now, why would he call himself Gemini?
Yep.
It couldn't be a movie reference from the time or anything, could it?
Oh. Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, but why don't you tell us about Gemini?
So, okay, well, why don't I first tell you about Geminis, Holly?
Like the zodiac sign?
Yeah, let me start there.
You know what? We already talked about the movie, and you know what? This is going to save it. Donny Rolling was a Gemini.
Yeah,
he actually was.
He actually was a Gemini.
So tell us, give us a little zodiac.
Exactly why I did a bunch of research on Geminis.
I know it is. Okay. I knew it.
Okay, so typically those born May 21st to June 20th are a Gemini zodiac sign.
You know zodiac.
Yeah.
You know how it goes.
You know them zodes.
Yeah.
Those zodies. So, Gemini, represented by the twins, is a dynamic and intellectual zodiac sign known for its charm, adaptability, and boundless curiosity. Bright and sociable, they are natural communicators who thrive on stimulating conversations and new experiences. With their quick wit and versatility, Geminis can seamlessly navigate diverse social circles, leaving others captivated by their energy and charisma.
Ooh.
Sounds just like Danny, doesn't it? However, the twins' dual nature has a shadowy side.
There it is.
Their restlessness can morph into instability, and their gift for persuasion can become manipulation. A dark Gemini may wear a mask of charm while spinning webs of deceit.
There it is.
Playing the roles of both hero and villain in their own narrative. At their most extreme, they can be calculating, fickle, and dangerously unpredictable, leaving a trail of confusion and emotional chaos.
Yikes.
Whether light or dark, Geminis are never boring, keeping the world guessing which side they'll show next.
Oh, boy.
I know.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, are there any other murderers that are Geminis? Do we have a reference point for this?
Well, actually, we do, Holly. Several notorious serial killers were born under the Gemini zodiac sign.
Oh, okay.
Some notable examples include old Jeff Dahmer.
Oh, no, Jeff.
He just made it. He was born on May 21st, 1960. Jeff was an American serial killer and sex offender who murdered 17 young men between 1978 and 1991. And his crimes involved necrophilia and cannibalism. But everybody knew that because they listened to our
2 parts on Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah,
that's right. And if you haven't,
get
stop
on that
now and go. You can finish.
You can finish it first. We're almost done. But then go listen to that one for sure. Also, Jeffrey Dahmer was obsessed with The Exorcist 3.
Yes.
Which is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And he was younger than Donny Rolling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which feels weird for some reason. I always think of Jeffrey Dahmer as a case that was like ancient, and it is not.
Yeah. So I don't know if okay, just a side chat for a second, because so he did his killings between 1978 and 1991, and The Exorcist 3 had only come out in 1990. So it felt like that was a bigger deal, but I mean, he did a lot of killings, I think, right near the end, right?
Yeah, he definitely did. I mean, he has crimes early in his life that were spread out, and then I think at the end it was like pretty rapid fire. That's when he was just like accumulating body count.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is weird because he was watching it at home.
Right.
It wasn't like he had to have had it on VHS, and it took a little while back then. It's not like we had digital downloads.
Yeah. Well, it didn't do well in the box office, so I wonder if it went
pretty quickly to video.
Quickly, yeah.
Possible. That is interesting.
Yeah.
But like something about that movie just grabs serial killers.
But also it could have been that same kind of deal where it was just like out of nowhere. Now all of a sudden this is like a very important film to you. You know what I mean? Like,
except for with Dahmer, he watched it over and over and over on repeat. And every time he brought a man into his house, he sat them down to watch that movie.
Right.
So like I think he really did lock into it.
He was probably just excited that this just came out.
Isn't it cool that I have this movie?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think
it on the black market.
Maybe. You never know. I don't think Donny Rolling associated it with it like Jeffrey Dahmer did. I think it's just a movie he saw and then grabbed a name out of it. But, you know.
Okay. All right. So a little bit more for Jeff. Jeff's ability to lure victims often stemmed from his disarming charm and calm demeanor, hallmarks of Gemini adaptability. However, his dark duality is striking. The polite neighbor by day and calculating killer by night. Gemini's restless curiosity is mirrored in Jeff's unsettling extermination with his victims' bodies, reflecting a mind that was disturbingly inventive and detached.
Yeah, Jeff's like your poster boy for that.
Yes. Then we have David Berkowitz, who is the son of Sam. That's his name. He's not like, who's Sam? You know,
Sam's not actually his dad. That's what he went by.
Yeah, son of Sam. So he's born on June 1st, 1953. David terrorized New York City in the late 1970s, killing 6 people and wounding 7 others. He claimed a demon-possessed dog commanded him to commit the murders. Known for his letters taunting police and the media, David's crimes exhibited the Gemini flair for communication. I'll bet with like a little twist to it, a bit twisty. His claims of receiving orders from a demon-possessed dog highlight the signs of duality, blurring reality and imagination, and the psychological games he played with the public showcase a shadowy intellect seeking attention and control. Then we have Peter Sutcliffe, who's the Yorkshire Ripper. He was born on June 2nd, 1946. Peter was an English serial killer who murdered 13 women and attempted to murder 7 others between 1975 and 1980. Peter lived a double life, an unassuming truck driver to those around him, but a relentless predator stalking the streets. This duality aligns with the Gemini ability to compartmentalize. His crimes also reveal a restless and unpredictable energy, reflecting the darker side toward impulsive and erratic behavior.
And another Ripper.
Another Ripper.
Which I was like, oh, I wonder if the person who is almost definitely Jack the Ripper is also a Gemini, but he's not. He's a Virgo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Which is close, though, right? Isn't that?
September.
Oh, September.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was some August, like June.
I'm sure it is some August.
It's still a break. Okay. So, Elizabeth Wetlifer.
Oh, I don't even know that name.
Was born on June 10th, 1967. Elizabeth is a Canadian nurse who confessed to murdering 8 elderly patients between 2007 and 2016.
Oh, no.
By administering lethal doses of insulin. Elizabeth's crimes as a nurse involved a chilling form of duality, the caregiver who became the harbinger of death.
Oh, there's a couple nurses that did that.
Yeah.
We covered one of them.
We did. Her ability to maintain a facade of professionalism while secretly committing murders highlights the Gemini's shadowy gift for deception. Her motivations seemed complex, like the shifting intentions often associated with the sign. Okay. Then we have Peter Curtin, the vampire of Dusseldorf.
Oh, his case is intense and gross.
I want to say vampire of Dusseldorf.
Yes,
probably
Dusseldorf.
Dusseldorf?
Yes.
Okay. Born on May 26, 1883. Peter was a German serial killer responsible for a series of murders and sexual assaults in the late 1920s. He earned his nickname due to his practice of drinking his victims' blood.
Yep.
Peter's crimes, which combined sadism, sexual violence, and even drinking the blood, reflect Gemini's extreme curiosity twisted into monstrous acts. His taunting of police and desire for infamy reveal the sign's need for intellectual stimulation and recognition, even at a horrifying cost. Then we have Richard Trenton Chase.
Oh my God,
we always have him.
Everything comes back to Richard Trenton Chase. I'm so glad we covered him very early in our tenure, just because it's a reference every single time.
Mm-hmm. So he, also known as the Vampire of Sacramento.
A lot of vampires.
Yeah. Born on May 23rd, 1953, Richard was an American serial killer who murdered 6 people in Sacramento, California from December 1977 to January 1978. He was nicknamed the Vampire of Sacramento because, you guessed it, he drank his victims' blood.
Not just that.
I know, and he cannibalized their remains.
He made smoothies out of them.
Yes, he did. Ugh.
Yeah.
Richard's crimes were marked by erratic behavior and a chilling detachment from reality, reflecting Gemini's darker tendency toward mental instability when unbalanced. His grotesque obsession with blood and cannibalism speaks to a warped form of curiosity gone horribly wrong, alongside the unpredictability often linked with the sign. So each of these killers reflects the Gemini archetype, pushed to its sinister extreme, a compelling duality, a flair for manipulation, and an unsettling restlessness. While these individuals share the Gemini zodiac sign, it's important to note that astrology does not determine behavior, and being a Gemini does not predispose someone to criminal activity. Just want to show some love to our Gemini listener.
Absolutely. There are wonderful Geminis out in the world as well. It's just the ones that are not great seem to share some qualities. That's about it.
And so I was thinking about Danny's case.
Mm-hmm.
So the typical Gemini traits of duality, adaptability, and communication.
He says he's there's 2 people inside my body.
I feel like those traits were twisted into tools for deception, evasion, and manipulation.
Yeah.
Contributing to his notoriety as this man.
Agree.
We're going to finish talking about.
We sure are. Well, thank you for that, Leslie.
You're welcome.
It's actually very revealing. And it's interesting. I think once a year, there's a meme that comes around that's serial killers that are every zodiac sign. This is where they fall.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I'm a Capricorn, and Capricorns are notoriously driven and work into their work and organized. I'm not organized, but I am ambitious. And there's never one on there. And then everyone always is but Israel Keys. So a terrible one is a Capricorn, and I don't love it, but I only got one. I'll have to look for yours next time.
I know.
Interesting. Okay. So when we left off with Danny, he had said, I have these different personalities. One is Gemini and one is Enad, which is Danny spelled backwards, and they do the bad things. I'm just little old me, right? But despite the big game he was talking, psychologists weren't buying it. Quote, I didn't buy it, said forensic psychologist Harry Kropp. This was Danny looking for something that would make what happened more dramatic and minimize his own culpability by saying, the devil made me do it. And I fully agree with that.
Sure.
In addition to this, claiming to have dissociative identity disorder, which is essentially what Danny is doing, is a very big claim. We've talked about DID before. I'm not going to get super into it, but he does meet the criteria for someone who might develop it. And it fits with your Gemini description because I think DID is a fascinating gift that the brain gives to people who have been through something awful. Because what happens is it's almost always in children that experience severe trauma. And it's usually around like 9 years old or so. And it has to be really bad. And Danny's childhood was awful. We've definitely established that. He had more than enough trauma for that. And then what your brain does is it says, I'm going to make a little pocket that's another person all together. And you're going to put that trauma, this specific bit of it, into that person, which is not you. And I'm going to put them over here. And I'm going to do that with a couple people. I'm going to give them these things that happened to you, these feelings you had, the people you needed even perhaps. You needed someone tough, so I'm going to make someone tough and put it over here. And then sometimes your brain lets them like come out when you need protecting. And it's actually like a very beautiful, it's inexplainable. It's a thing that the brain does that I think is pretty much magic.
Yeah.
Right? So he does fit that criteria, but I don't think that it actually happened to him. Because people who have legitimate like alters and that have DID, they're not in a lot of control of it usually, and they can't identify it super well right away. And he just doesn't, it just doesn't line up with how
he's
the
like
experience.
romanticizing it.
Absolutely. Yeah, he definitely is. And usually it's not like, well, they did this bad thing. It's usually like, well, this person took over because I was in an argument and I don't know how to handle that or whatever. So anyway. Also, people with DID usually talk about their alters, and I'm not saying this all of the time, but the cases that I've heard, in ways where they're like, they understand that they're this part of them that they need. They understand that they're protecting them. They don't usually say like, this is my bad thing.
Right.
It's just not usually that cut and dry. It's not usually that easy.
Right. Like even if they are scared of that side, it's almost like a Stockholm syndrome. Like they still feel like they need that.
For sure. They understand that this side of them is protecting them from something.
Yeah.
That's not what's happening here at all.
Yeah.
So
it's more just an excuse to do bad
absolutely.
things.
It's just saying I could have this because that wasn't me at all.
Yeah.
That was somebody else.
I gotcha.
So it doesn't really work within the narrative of what DID actually is. And later, Danny would also go on to say that he murdered all of the people in Gainesville because he wanted to be a famous superstar serial killer, and I quote, like Ted Bundy, who was his hero and he talked about all the time. I can't even with that because he does physically kind of look like Ted. He's not as generically good looking as Ted Bundy was. He has kind of more of a droopy dog quality to him. And he doesn't have the same crazy eyes as Ted Bundy had. His are look like sad.
Right.
But I mean, I think that this explanation is a lot closer to the truth, though. I think that is part of what he wanted. Because why else would he pose those bodies like that?
Right.
It did nothing for him in the moment. It was all about what the people that found them were going to experience and how they were going to then portray him later.
Right.
Which also is a level of planning that you would not have if an alter had taken over and just did something in the moment. So he's really shooting himself in the foot all over the place.
Unless that alter was planning on the side.
Which is not something alters really do.
Okay. That's just like in the movies.
Yeah, the movies are... the movies give them like a lot more credit than a lot of times. I mean, like we could do a whole episode on DID because I really think it's fascinating. And there are people in the psychological community today that don't even think it's real.
Okay.
I think most people really don't understand what it is at all. And I think that we are so conditioned to think it's like Sybil or like the devil made me do it. We're so conditioned to think that an evil person takes over and can make you do things that it's hard to backpedal and take all that back and then go, no, actually, it's this.
Right.
So,
Okay.
So after his whole like psychological thing and claiming he had dissociative identity disorder, or he probably called it multiple personalities because that's what they called it back then, they head into a trial. And at this point, his defense just wants to avoid the death penalty because he has confessed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no way that he's going to get nothing. And also he presents himself as someone who knows what's going on.
Right.
Which means like you can try an insanity defense all you want, but I don't think a jury is ever going to buy it enough to let you out.
Mm-hmm.
So their thought is like, well, we'll just try to get him locked up and maybe have psychological lockup, I guess. And the trial is super dramatic. Make no mistake about that. And I think part of this is also because this is the golden era of court TV, as I mentioned before. So there's a camera in the courtroom the whole time,
Mm-hmm.
and it is being broadcast.
Which is exactly what he wanted.
Oh, for sure. He is everywhere. He's on TV everywhere. And they go talk to his mom at her house. Like they go like, oh, court TV goes afterwards. Like, let's go talk to your mom and like see what she said on the stand and how she's feeling. And she lets out all of this stuff about his past and how hard it was. And you can hear his father screaming at her from the other room. This all paints like a very vivid picture of a sympathetic character, right? Not sympathetic, but it does lend credence to what he's trying to say he is.
Yeah.
So in that way, I don't know that court TV did anybody any favors.
Yeah.
They also bring in his wife to testify on the stand. Like his mom, as I said, talks about his childhood. His wife, whose name is Omather Loomis. Nobody pronounces it right. Loomis is her second husband's last name. She is this extremely soft-spoken, very, very deep Southern-sounding nurse. Very naive. She and Danny met when she was like 17 and he was 19. They immediately got married. And she says, they're like, oh, so his father like came to your house in the middle of the night and like did all this crazy stuff. And she was like, no, none of that happened. When I saw him with his parents, they seemed to get along fine. I never saw any indication of like a really scary, violent relationship in his adult life. Which flies right in the face of a lot of things that he said and his family said. Now, I don't doubt that all of those terrible things happened to him as a child. What I doubt and what I think is blurry is how long and how severe it extended into his adulthood.
Okay.
Because he said in a courtroom that like his father kept it up, that he would come to his house in the middle of the night and all of this crazy stuff, which I'm not even going to tell the whole story because, again, I just think he made some of it up. I really do. But we only have him to rely on.
Yeah.
It's his story. That's all we have. And his wife, it's very key, said like, if that happened, it wasn't in front of me. Ever.
How long were they married for?
I think like 3 or 4 years. Not long. Long enough to have one child. And then he was very violent to her. And so she left him.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but and her testimony lines up with him and his faults. He was mean to her. He was violent to her. That's culpability on him. He doesn't want that. So anyway.
I wonder if he would have like really vivid dreams or something. Like if what happened to him as a child happened.
Maybe.
Then he could have just had these vivid dreams of like reoccurring.
That's definitely possible.
Because I not anymore. I've grown out of like a reoccurring nightmare, but I had that like through college, like this like couple of reoccurring nightmares of like just like scary movies that I'd watch as a kid, but it just felt like everything was still just there.
That's
like,
definitely possible. He could just see his dad coming for him at night because he did come for him so much when he was a kid.
Yeah.
Now, if you were their defense attorney, would have made a little more sense. They didn't go there at all.
Okay.
And if it was me, I would have gone a different route as well. So I think Donny Rolling's motives for his crimes were complex and rooted in a combination of psychological factors, personal trauma, and a desire for power and control. Because a lot of times if you're out of control as a child, you have this trauma that you just couldn't avoid. What you want in your life is as much control as you can get, right? He often cited a troubled childhood filled with abuse, neglect, and a volatile family environment as significant influences on his behavior. Rolling expressed feelings of anger and resentment, which manifested in violent acts against his victims. So there is evidence that he was playing out some feelings of violence against his mother on these women because they all looked like his mother, and this is very key. Additionally, he describes a compulsion to kill that he struggled to understand, suggesting that it was tied to a need for dominance and a warped sense of identity. Overall, his motives were intertwined with deep psychological issues and a history of personal trauma. Now, if I were to get on the stand and say, here's what I think is wrong with him, and I'm just me, I would have identified something called reactive attachment disorder, which is a mental health condition that can develop in children who have experienced severe neglect or disruptions in their early relationships, particularly with primary caregivers. It is characterized by difficulties in forming healthy emotional attachments and relationships. Now, here's where you're going to see why I'm saying this. Children with RAD may exhibit a range of symptoms, including inability to form attachments, difficulty in developing close relationship with caregivers or peers, emotional dysregulation, intense emotions such as anger or sadness that can be hard to manage, withdrawal, avoidance of social interactions, and a tendency to be emotionally detached, behavioral issues, aggression, defiance, or difficulty following the rules, lack of response to comfort, a reduced ability to seek or accept comfort from caregivers. So to me, it seems like he had this, couldn't attach to anybody as a child. And so he just flew off the rails later in life.
Yeah, I mean, none of that sounds like him to me, though.
No, you just think he's a Gemini?
Yeah.
Got it. I got it. He was also diagnosed with a few other things while they were going through the psychological roster. The usuals, antisocial personality disorder, which most serial killers in the 90s were diagnosed with, no matter what. It does make some sense here. We've talked about antisocial personality disorder before. He was not diagnosed as borderline, but antisocial. It's an important difference to make. There were people, I think at one point, that of course said he's probably schizophrenic because this seems psychotic to me. That's another thing that every serial killer is given at one point in time. They're all supposedly schizophrenic. But he had psychologists who very quickly ruled that out because they said to us, this does not look like a psychotic episode. It's not chaos. It's not uncontrolled. It's very planned and very specific, and he knows everything he did. It just doesn't look like psychosis. And it just doesn't follow the rules, if that makes any sense. And they also diagnosed him with paraphilia, which is the blanket term for something not in the ordinary realm of sexuality, gives you sexual feelings. And that's probably because they do believe he had relations with some of the bodies after they were deceased. So that would qualify, just like Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy, his hero. But antisocial personality disorder has some bullet points that seem a lot like him too. So disregard for others. This can manifest through deceit, manipulation, or lack of remorse for harming others. That's a lot of your Gemini stuff too. Chronic violation of social norms, engaging in behaviors that are grounds for arrest, such as theft or aggression. I think we got that too. Impulsivity, which his teacher said he had as a child. Irritability and aggression, I think we understand that's there too. Recklessness or disregarding the safety of others or oneself. Irresponsibility and lack of remorse. So I do believe that that's a pretty accurate diagnosis.
Yeah.
That one seems to be pretty good. So they hear all of these things. All his three-ring circus of stories of why he's not guilty, but they don't care. On April 20th, 1994, Donny Rolling was sentenced to death. And they did put on his permanent records that he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, although that's hard to pin down in documents, and paraphilia. They didn't put anything else in, but that is on his documents.
Okay.
While he was in jail, he did a lot of awful, crazy things. One of which was he fell in love with a journalist who had come to speak to him to write his autobiography. She was doing it with him, which is common. And I'm not even going to say this woman's name because he's not the only serial killer she fell in love with and married in prison and then wrote their life story and then benefited from it. And I think it's gross. But he used his appeal, because you get an appeal, and he got to appeal his sentence. They didn't. I mean, it was the same. They didn't do anything. But he used his time on the stand during his appeal to sing to her. He just sang her a little love song. Gross, right? Yeah. So then they released the book. You can still buy the book. I will not say the name of it because I don't think you should. And then he was taken back to court because, funny, you mentioned the Son of Sam killer. A killer benefiting from their story being published, monetarily, is against a law that falls under these Son of Sam laws, which means you can't do that. That's illegal.
Okay.
He can't see any money from that.
Yeah.
And so he was, I guess, extra because he's definitely, I mean, what else are you going to do? They're like, okay, more bad. But more death for you. Yeah. And he's interviewed by a few news stations. If you want to see him drone on, you can. I don't recommend it. It's just very sad, saggy. Of course, he found God later in his jail sentence, and he would sing hymns and talk about, how he was brought to the light and he had so much remorse. And right before his execution, he confessed to the Shreveport murders. Not in court, not at any other time. This was a bones for time situation. He thought it was going to buy him more life, actually. And so, he said, I want to talk to somebody. I did do these things. And you can see, we'll put this in our photo suite. There is a written confession from him about the Shreveport murders. He didn't have to drag in another prisoner for that one.
And so they were just like, okay, cool, bye.
Basically, they were like, you're still going to die in like 2 weeks, but all right, man, that's fine. I just thought that was nuts. And then I'm going to give a little wiki rundown on his execution. So I missed this part. He gave that confession letter to his spiritual advisor, Reverend Mike Hudspeth. So he was like, I need to speak to my spiritual advisor. Here's my confession. His last meal was a lobster tail, and his last statement was just singing a gospel hymn as they executed him by lethal injection. He was executed on October 25th, 2006. After the U.S. Supreme Court rejected that last-ditch appeal, but I'll confess, they, just like you said, they were like, whatever, He was pronounced dead at 6:13 p.m. EDT. And a lot of the victims' families had members present during his execution, to which a lot of them had to say that they really felt as though justice had been served that day.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, none of them were out for blood or malicious people. They were just he brought so much horror upon all of us that, we feel like this is what had to happen.
Yeah. And now he's finally quiet.
Yeah, because he was not quiet when he was in jail. And he was in jail for over 10 years. Death row is not short. So, yeah, that's Donny Rolling.
Wow.
Yeah. So I know you're probably thinking, anybody out there, that's definitely not Scream.
Oh, yeah.
It's not Scream.
Totally forgot about that.
And it is not exactly Scream. It was inspired. Scream was inspired by the media's involvement in the crime. So that atmosphere in the early 90s of court TV and reporters swarming the scene. And I mean, reporters were always at crime scenes, it's not new, but in the 90s it had, I just think with how pervasive 24-hour news cycles had become and court TV, there was just more. Yeah. And this one came up at a time when Kevin Williamson was like, hey, I see that. I want to write a story about it. And a lot of people wonder, did Donny Rolling wear a mask? No, he did not.
Right.
The Scream mask, and we can talk about this in Postmortem, and I will, I can add a little extra somewhere on it, or I'll link the article. The Scream mask was chosen as a costume because it was a cheap Halloween costume. They got it Spencer's gift.
I do remember that.
And that's what they wanted. They wanted it to just look like something that could blend in with the party. But then I was talking to our friend John Rodcassa about this, and he was like, wait, why does Donny Rolling's face look like that ghost face? And it does. It has those droopy eyes, and he has those droopy eyes. Yeah, so it was kind of fitting. I know it wasn't on purpose, but it was kind of fitting. And no, he did not wear a mask when he committed his crimes. Nobody saw him, though, because everybody he encountered died.
Okay.
So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that's about all, folks.
All right.
Gotta be done with him. Toast?
Yeah. Toast. Well, to all the women.
Yes, to all the victims and their families.
Cheers.
And and Cynthia, the neighbor from Shreveport. Yeah. Because what an amazing memory that woman had, which is why that's who I put in our neighborhood. Yeah. That she was just like, wait a minute, I think I know what guy that is. Yeah. He went to my church and he was creepy and confessed that he liked to stab people to my husband. So cheers, Cynthia, for really I don't know if all the pieces would have come together without her. So cheers.
Or her boyfriend.
Her husband. Yeah,
Her
who also was like,
husband.
I do seem to recall him liking to stab people.
Yeah. And I told Cynthia.
And I said, he's got to go.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers to him for trying to protect his wife.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's good citizenship. Way to go.
Yeah.
All right. And if we simply chose to trust the security of our own back door, we would be dead.
Thank you for listening to the We Would Be Dead podcast. Hit subscribe now to never miss an episode. Rate and review our show on iTunes. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Would Be Dead Pod. And join our Facebook group to discuss the podcast and more.
Hook 'em, book 'em, cook 'em.